This is Office Hours,
the show for sharing experiences and stories in governance, risk management, and compliance. All right, Kevin, we're going to do something different this time.
What are we talking about, Dan?
This time we're going to do our first episode off directly from some of our watcher feedback.
All right.
So this nice fellow, Jonathan Lin, on LinkedIn says he's a senior financial compliance analyst. Send us a mail. You can see the address there. So send us feedback if you'd like to see an episode on a topic you're interested in. He said, one thing that remains a big issue with the PCAOB is applying substantive testing to controls-based testing, i.e. when you test all 100% samples, if you find any errors, then a control implicitly fails. It'd be nice to see if you had any commentary on clients that you've helped get over that line using data analytics to conclude effectiveness of controls. I thought this was an interesting question because we've had a number of episodes talking about automation of control testing, automation of risk assessment. We had a show on SOX maturity. In fact, I think it was the very first episode. And we talked about the top of that maturity curve being completely automating the controls away. This, to me, what Jonathan brings up is an absolutely infuriating issue. So this episode is probably going to be marked explicit because there's no chance I'm going to be able to get through it without dropping a 4-letter word somewhere along the way.
And why exactly is it so infuriating?
We'll talk about that.
Perfect.
But the bottom line is exactly what Jonathan's trying to do is not only the best approach for business reasons, because we can automate control testing, make compliance easier, all of this sort of thing, but it's also the best approach for purposes of assurance and accuracy, which is actually what the PCAOB is looking for in their regulatory oversight that they're exercising over public companies and the accounting firms.
Right.
And yet somehow, despite that it's the best approach for both sides, somehow it ends up in this mess with clients all the time. So I thought it was a good episode because Jonathan's question is relevant to, I don't even know how many, we deal with this, we run into this question a lot. And in, 80% or 90% of the cases, what people do is fall back to
the old way of doing things.
Yeah, do manual SOX testing, which sucks. Don't do that. Fight the good fight. So this episode, Kev, is about the PCAOB pain with analytics and automation.
Nice. I'm excited.
So my first thing, this does get blamed on the PCAOB. That's what I hear from our customers, and that's what I hear in the market broadly when I go to conferences and such. But my first question is it really the PCAOB?
What's PCAOB?
Public Company Accounting Oversight Board. So you have this nice-looking fellow here come around. This is your external auditor.
Yeah, he looks like he's ready to have a good time with you and your company.
Exactly. Yeah, absolutely. Maybe that having done some external audits myself, I get to make that joke in all fairness. But what I do see happens is there is enormous variation between how this problem is treated based on I don't know what, quite frankly. It seems to me to be based on which audit firm you have, or way more importantly than which audit firm, which partner, which engagement manager is actually looking after your audit, seems to cause a lot of variation in how this issue is addressed. Sometimes, great, you got analytics and automation. We can rely on that as the auditors. Off we go. Other times, you get into this rat hole of, where there was 3 or 4 exceptions, we can't rely on that. And sometimes it goes into auditing into the black hole where we got to know everything about everything. And what I see happens is this auditor fellow uses the PCAOB as that bat to beat the client into submission, right? So they say, we have to fail that control because there was a couple of exceptions. It's not our fault. That's what the PCAOB says we have to do.
Right.
I don't know about you, Kev, but at least for me, I see enough variation between how different clients are treated by their auditor or by, even if they're with the same audit firm but in different parts of the country or whatever, that variation says to me, I'm not sure that that's what the PCAOB said. It's the PCAOB says something, and as it filters down the chain through their examinations, through national quality practices, through individual partners, we end up with this long chain of people, and it's like playing the telephone game with a bunch of kindergartners that said one thing at the beginning and it turns into something else entirely when it gets down to the end of the line with the client.
Right. I can see you're really passionate about this.
Yeah. Okay.
And in fact, talking about problems with this, one of our most data-driven customers who prides his organization in automating control testing away and ensuring that they're fixing problems as they happen, they have their external auditors come in and say, oh, we can't. You tested 100% of the population, but we need sample testing. So you have to redo the test. You have to now
fucking insane.
But we already tested 100% of the population. Why would
There's nothing left to sample. There's nothing left to test.
That kind of thing drives me crazy because it defeats the whole point. You have way more assurance if you're testing 100% of the sample.
Crappier for the audit, crappier for the business, crappier for everybody because somebody along the way was dumb. I don't know how else to say it.
Yeah.
It's either the regulator's dumb, the auditor's dumb, or the business is dumb. Something is dumb.
Right. Something's wrong.
So I'm going to talk about a couple of strategies that I think can help, that I think need to help deal with this.
All right.
2 of them are real strategies. I'll get to those last. 2 of them are opportunities for me to complain some more.
All right.
The first strategy, make change with the PCAOB. There is an effort underway at the PCAOB to think about adjusting how they work to account for new technology and new approaches and that sort of thing. And you probably can't read what that says on the screen, but this was a talk back in December from a member of the PCAOB board, update on efforts to enhance quality, advancing PCAOB oversight programs to significant emerging trends in audits, analytics, artificial intelligence, etc.
Oh, it sounds like they're going to catch up with.
I know they're actually working on a research project because I participated in. I was lucky enough to. I was thankful they reached out and was able to participate in the research project where they're trying to better understand the effects of these tools on the audit. Now that's where they're primarily focused. Is how does the auditor, the external auditors, use analytics within an audit, but surely I hope that extends to, of course, how management and how compliance teams and how the front line of the business, how the finance department is able to use analytics and automation for their controls and actually have their external auditors rely on it and reduce the audit fee.
Yeah, seems like a win-win to me.
So the one thing I will say is there's a whole bunch of PCAOB auditing standards. And that said, of course, it's PCAOB, the fifth standard, that talks primarily about internal controls, which is really what Jonathan's question's aimed at and what annoys me the most. Because that's what affects management. What they want to impose on the auditors, that's a story. That's a discussion for another day.
Okay.
What PCAOB Auditing Standard 5 says is this section that you see right here. This is right off their website. The testing of operating effectiveness of controls. They got to test controls to determine whether a control is operating as designed and whether the person performing possesses authority and competence. And what does it say about how you do that? It's this paragraph 45. Procedures the auditor performs to test operating effectiveness include a mix of inquiry, appropriate personnel, observation of the company's operations, inspection of relevant documentation, and reperformance of the control. That says almost nothing about how you actually test control.
Yeah.
Now, an analytic basically is a reperformance of the control. That is the strongest form of audit evidence for anybody who ever went to auditing school and became a certified public accountant.
Right.
So it's the
In
strongest form.
cases where there's data to reperform.
Absolutely. So if you're taking the strongest form of audited evidence and then literally doing it on every transaction, as far as I can tell, there's no better way to test operating effectiveness within the confines of this standard than using automation and analytics to validate and automate controls through data. So what happens is the PCAOB goes out, though, and they do inspections of the audits done by firms who audit public companies. And they say, hey, and they disclose to the public the findings of those. So, hey, KPMG, you did these things wrong in your audit. E&Y, you did these things wrong in your audits that we inspected. Da-da-da-da-da-da-da. And those are a big deal. Those are a big deal and a big problem for the audit firms, and I totally understand that. I used to work in one. But the fact that they do that then that's where the telephone game starts. Now you have one PCAOB inspector saying to one partner, hey, this can't be done this way, da-da-da-da-da-da-da.
Because that's that person's opinion of how it should be done.
I think it's got to be in part, right? Like when a standard is only this clear, you have to make interpretation and you have to make judgment calls along the way. But then, of course, lawyers get involved and everybody tries to cover their ass and all these sorts of things. And the process works. The firms in turn have to improve their quality standards and how they do reviews and everything else. But the subjectivity there creates this problem. And so when I say I think we need to ask the PCAOB to make change, we need to work the appropriate channels as a profession to participate in the research projects as we have, and continue to lobby for and ask for change that will make the whole process better for assurance, better for the business, etc.
And I'm sure everybody has good intentions in mind where they're just trying to make things better. They're trying to make these organizations operate better.
It's all in good intentions. Yeah. It's all in good intentions, but it doesn't mean you can't do dumb things with the best of intentions.
Sure. The PCAOB should be looking to improve just like they're trying to enforce other people to improve on their processes.
Absolutely. So, second strategy, because that involves changing standards, it's a long road to changing or to publishing PCAOB standards, interpretation, etc. that will deal with this. The next most near-term strategy is, I told you I wouldn't get through it without dropping 4-letter words. I wrote one right in the slides. Don't take shit from your auditors. Their job is reasonable assurance that we're after, and there's always compensating factors in these sorts of scenarios. So we often tend to take the auditor's word as gospel. Just like the auditors take the PCAOB's word as gospel and say, we have to do this. Push back and say, I don't care if you want me to take samples. It's stupid. Like, what are you going to do?
Yeah. Yeah, it's just a bunch of extra work. Here's the evidence from testing 100% of the population. Why would I take a sample of the evidence I already have?
Right. So if that's what some... Look, I was a staff 2 auditor 2 years out of school making people do stuff that was dumb. Just push back and say, no, that doesn't make sense, and escalate it to the engagement manager, to the engagement partner, to whatever. I had a good example I saw on this. We had a customer down in, they were actually headquartered down in South Africa, but they were subject to SOX issues because they had stock listed in the U.S. Mm-hmm. Or their parent company had stock listed in the U.S. Whatever the case was, they had to be SOX compliant. And what they did, an enterprising fellow there in the SOX team, took the step to say, we're going to put in place automation. We're going to automate this, and this. These, out of our 200 controls, we're going to automate these 40, and actually went to the audit partner, the audit partner that looked after them, and said, if we do all of that, and if we do good work, and this is the plan and how it's all going to work, are you going to rely on the work, number one? And number two, are you going to reduce the audit fee? Because here's what the standards say. You can rely on the work of in this case, SOX compliance team in the case that it's independent and competent and all that. I want your opinion on that right now before I implement all of this technology in accordance with the standards. And the partner said, yes, of course. Yeah, that's what the standards say. If you actually implement a program like that, we'll reduce the audit fee and take benefit from the efficiency, etc. He said, great, thank you. I'm glad you said that. Now write it down on the audit firm's letterhead and send it to me.
Oh, wow. Because he wanted proof just in case they came in. Because those auditors are going to want to protect
sure as hell
their consulting fees, right?
When the engagement manager on the ground came around and said, oh, well, we're going to have to test this anyway because we can't rely on these scripts, on this automation for whatever reason, guess what he did?
Pulls out the letter.
So just be thinking about that and push back on your auditors because, like it or not, you're the client, and that's the reality. And we're not looking to be treated, not looking to be treated special. You're looking to say, hey, I'm doing way more than most every other company. Treat me like it. Not only don't make me do more work, but reduce my fee as a result.
Yeah.
Because we're doing the best assurance work out there.
And really what they should be doing is deep diving on your automation program and helping you improve that so you can gain more efficiency instead of let's retest everything.
I'm glad you said that. That's where we go to strategy 3.
I didn't even know what strategy 3 was.
Third strategy. This is a good strategy. I've seen this done by a number of our customers. Turn the analytics, turn the automation into the control. And then justify that, live up to the standard, do IT general control testing, ITGC, make it a SOX relevant system, the analytics platform. Make it a SOX relevant system, do ITGCs, and then make sure that exceptions are getting remediated and call that the control. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Because now, if it's a SOX relevant system and the actual process of remediating exceptions is the control of watching these controls and remediating exception, if that is the control, then they have to rely on it. Right? So they have to rely on it, and more importantly, the analytics themselves become an application control. You don't have to test application controls. You only have to validate it works one time.
Right.
Assuming you have good ITGCs, right? And then you have IT-dependent manual controls that are people work and resolve the exceptions. That gives you a buffer, a safety window of if somebody forgets to do whatever the control is. If a purchase had to be approved by these 3 levels and one approval was missing, guess what? We have a control. The actual control is that we watch for that happening and we fix it within 7 days.
Right.
Boom! Problem solved. Now you've got a safety window between that, what was the control, the actual PO approval or whatever. You have a buffer between that and the actual control, which is we monitor all of them and fix them. Or use both. One's the frontline, one's the prevent control, one's the detect control, or the compensating control.
Because whenever humans are involved and humans have to do something, they're going to inherently miss steps. So if you're using analytics to be the control, to find when steps are being missed, and then you make sure the steps happen, absolutely, everybody's happy. The control is operating effectively.
So the only additional work here, and if you even need to do it, but the only additional work here, if you volunteer to do it, is to count the automation analytics platform, ACL in our case, to do ITGCs on that program. But then from there, you build out the automation till the cows come home, and your program only gets more and more efficient, and your controls, you less likely to have a problem because you have a safety window and a compensating control. So turn the control testing into the control.
Right. Yeah, and we have a number of customers who do this, some of them on almost massive scale and some on much smaller scales when they're just solving.
Absolutely.
Because it can be really expensive to implement new controls to fix problems, and sometimes data automation can just be a quick, easy, cheap solution.
Absolutely. So that is a killer strategy. but use it in conjunction with strategy 2. Tell your auditors up front, don't take any shit from them. Tell them you want your audit fee reduced. And also, by the way, if you're really enterprising like my friend down there, get them to sign off that you're going to reduce the audit fee and then use that as immediate ROI in your business case to get funding to hire people who build analytics or buy software or whatever you need to do, right? So that's strategies 1 through 3. Nice. Strategy number 4 is my favorite.
Is that why you left it for last?
That's why I left it for last. Fourth strategy. If people are going to ask stupid questions, give them a stupid answer.
This is such a Dan strategy.
Look, you can only fight dumb for so long.
Yeah.
And then sometimes it's easier just to let the dumb have the dumb. So what I suggest in this strategy, and I know I'm going to get emails for even suggesting this, and yes, I absolutely have done it before. So take that for what it's worth. Analyze the entire population of occurrences, completely automate the control, all of that sort of thing. Do that for purposes of management. Management every day extracts data and builds reports and whatever else. That's totally legitimate. Do that with all of the controls, and that's just a management exercise.
To provide the business assurance.
Provide the business inside assurance, all these sorts of things, how their controls are working. Now, since you've already done all the work, you've automated the control completely, just completely automate the SOX testing. Do you know how you automate the SOX testing, Kevin?
I have an idea of what you're getting at.
Let me pull up a suggestion here. So let's say I've built some very simple automation. This is an analysis that basically what it does is when I run this, it goes and pulls. We have a control. We terminate the easiest one in the world. When we terminate an employee, we remove their system access. What this automation is doing is pulling down my list of all Active Directory users, pulling down the payroll. We've talked about this before, comparing who's been terminated in payroll, who's still in whatever the system is, Active Directory or SAP or whatever, and saying, here's the list. This isn't the list of the exceptions. I've pulled payroll data, I've pulled active user data, put them together, and I have a big table.
Right.
All the data. Combined together. No problem. That's just the data transformation. Now, I did that just for management's purposes. Now, against this table, I could run another test, I could run a report. Let's call it a report. I'll run a report where I filter for who is both terminated and active, right?
Right.
And provide that to management as
a report. So that they can.
Yeah, and they'll say, thank you. That's very useful of you, my friend, the SOX person, or the control manager, or the internal auditor, or whoever you are. And you say, you're welcome. Then I create a second piece of automation that's very complicated. It says, open that table, find random number of 25 of them, and kick them out. It takes exactly this long to run. And there's my sample of 25 with all the testing already done. I already know all 25 aren't, because my other table was 100,000 employees, and there were 2 that were active in payroll in the system. Here, I took the sample of 25. Guess what? They all shows terminated in the system, terminated in Active Directory. The SOX testing is completely automated, and this is what you give them. What you give the auditor. I did my sample of 25, and off you go. Now, it would seem that that's disingenuous if I know that I ran the report for management, and on the whole population there was 5 or 6 exceptions. But come on, let's have a degree of reasonableness here, number one. But more importantly, assuming those get actioned assuming that report is run every day and those are getting actioned and resolved timely, it's still plenty good. And the auditors were going to do this kind of testing, forget it. we did it for you, and there you go.
Yeah, I couldn't believe when a customer told me that they test 100% of the population. The auditor comes in and forces them essentially to take a sample and then retest that sample. Just write it into your automation to take the sample and test it.
Write it into your automation.
And then that's the report that you give to your auditors.
Yeah, it's all about language, right? So it's all about how do I use the words? How do I use the words in a sentence? It's now I'm not automating the control or whatever. It's just showing them I automated the control testing. Here's the result of the full sample, and hand that to them. And so now you've both automated, process monitoring for management, which is real value, but as a side benefit, you get automation of your SOX testing out the other side.
I actually really like that strategy because it just a few more lines of code.
I feel almost dirty using it, but it's like
if they're going to force you to sample.
If you're going to force to sample, fine. I did it fair. If there had been exceptions in my 25, then there were exceptions in my 25, and we deal with it just like we deal with any other exception. The fact that there were other exceptions in the whole population, well, as long as I don't have an ethical issue with thinking that we actually had a control failure, as long as we felt like it was adequately controlled, this is how they want the testing done. This is how you get the testing done.
Yeah, I really like it.
I'm going to get so many emails from people who say that this is a ridiculous approach. But on that note, thanks, Kevin, for bearing through perhaps a few four-letter words that I dropped there, and we'll try and remember to keep those out in the future. Definitely, if you don't mind, support us by liking and subscribing our videos, subscribe to our podcast, visit our website. That really helps support us and make it so we can do more episodes. See you next time.
Thanks for watching.